Overnight, in the capital of Ukraine, the sound of missile strikes and air sirens. Explosions rocking several cities, including the capital of Kyiv, targeting military installations, including air bases housing fighter jets.
Ukrainian forces bear down on Russian targets. Military officials tell CBS News troops are preparing for an all-out assault to recapture Kherson, the only regional capital the Russians have conquered since the invasion began nearly 6 months ago.
Тем, кто позволяет себе такие заявления в отношении России, хочу напомнить, что наша страна также располагает различными средствами поражения, а по отдельным компонентам и более современными, чем у стран НАТО. И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф. А те, кто пытаются шантажировать нас ядерным оружием, должны знать, что роза ветров может развернуться и в...
How did we get to this point in the 21st century where the world is witnessing a large-scale conventional war on the European continent for the first time since the end of the Second World War? A development that only a few years ago was seemingly almost incomprehensible. How do we get to this point where the conversation of nuclear weapons actually being used on the battlefield and the potentiality of an exchange even between global powers has become this pertinent in terms of international affairs and security? How did we get here? There's a lot of conversation since Russia has invaded Ukraine February 24th, 2022. There's been a lot of conversation going around in the world, some by scholars, some by those on social media, and there's lots and lots of conversation, politicians from different parts of the world about how this all started. My name is Dr. Philip Travis, and in this course, A History of Modern Russia, I hope to provide some insight and clarity on the historical roots of modern Russia and likewise the historical roots of this destructive conflict. In this course, we're going to trace the history of modern Russia from the 19th century to the present. And the answer to how we got here is a really complicated one. And for those of us who are passionate about history, whether we are students or professors or just passionate about learning about history, we all understand history is complicated. And usually when we think there's a simple answer to something, we dig a little deeper and we realize that it's a lot more complicated than that. So there's no simple answer to how we got here. But I hope that in this course, the readings in this course, the discussions in this course, my lectures in this course, that we're going to have greater insight when it all comes to an end a number of weeks from now, then we'll have greater insight into exactly how we got here. If you're not a student of mine, I post these video lectures in my YouTube channel, which is called History Changes. That was the little brand icon that you saw there at the beginning of the video. And subscribe to my channel, and I will be uploading video lectures on this subject throughout the term. So even if you're not enrolled as a student of mine, you could still follow some of the lectures in the course. For my students, a little bit about this class. First of all, what are the images? This is our class banner that you see here. The images you see here, of course, here you see a young Joseph Stalin next to Lenin during the early Bolshevik period in the early 1920s, the Soviet period. Stalin, of course, not Lenin's favorite, but Stalin would, after Lenin's death, position himself to seize power in the Soviet Union. And we have some really fascinating readings from some of our books. We have a book from Robert Service called History of Modern Russia. We also have a book by Kees Botterblum called Life in Stalin's Soviet Union. And there's also some supplemental readings relating to material culture in Russia. Material culture meaning understanding history and the life of people in the 19th century through the 20th century by examining the things that were the material things that were really important to them. Blue jeans, for example, during the Cold War were very, very, very popular in the Soviet Union. And so we'll be looking at some really interesting readings and discussions. And we'll also have some supplemental readings on our current situation in the 21st century, the Putin era of Russia. Here we have the Berlin Wall, of course, during the Cold War, in of course, Germany. Berlin, Germany. We'll be talking quite a bit about the Cold War in this class. Here we see, of course, American President Richard Nixon alongside Leonid Brezhnev during the later age of the Soviet Union, prior to the eventual rise of Mikhail Gorbachev. And over here, you have an image of Polish citizens during the Poznań uprising with a sign that says, effectively, "We demand bread," which really, this was in 1956, and really sort of displayed some of the fissures that were developing in the Soviet Union's imperial system during that time, during the Cold War. So a little bit about this class. We'll be dealing with all of these subjects and so much more, from discussing the development of Russia under the Tsars to the Bolshevik Revolution. So many subjects to look at, to the development of what Solzhenitsyn called the Gulag Archipelago. We'll be reading about what was really a Soviet slave labor system during the 30s, 40s, and 50s, particularly most robustly used during that period of time. We'll be talking about the Cold War. We'll be talking about leadership. We'll be talking about life for everyday people in society through readings that relate to the history of material culture. And we'll be talking about some of the factors, of course. All of these contribute to understanding how we got in this situation today, a situation where the Western world finds itself directly in confrontation, albeit not with sort of ground troops on the ground, but in direct confrontation with Russia over Ukraine, an independent sovereign nation, which of course the Soviet Union, Russia, agreed to during the Budapest Agreement in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War, but of course was a long-term part of the development of the Soviet Union, and also a significant Ukraine, the area of Ukraine was during the Tsarist period as well. So we'll be talking about all of these subjects in this course. In this course, you have a research essay that you will write. There's a prompt on the syllabus that explains the research paper and what your expectations are in this paper. We'll talk more about that as we move forward. Everyone's going to submit a paper proposal, and we'll talk more about that. That's not due for a number of weeks, so we'll talk more about that as we get closer to it. The paper is not due to the end of the term during exam week. In this class, many of you have my classes before. We have a midterm exam. We have a final exam in the class. There are weekly discussions. Not every week, generally speaking. We forego discussion forums, particularly during exam weeks. But most weeks there are discussion forums. Remember for full credit on the discussion forums, post once, reply twice, 2 separate days starting Thursday. I also offer extra credit regularly during the week, and you get the extra credit, which will start next week. You get the extra credit by simply watching the announcements and making an extra credit summary post or factoid response, if you will, in an extra credit discussion board that is posted along with the announcement. And I'll probably be extending that to Thursday during the week as opposed to Wednesday, which has been more common previously. There are some quizzes, reading quizzes, and also lecture quizzes as well. So I hope everyone is ready to really enjoy this course. It should be a fascinating course. And I hope at the end of it, it really does help give us all greater clarity on how the world has come to the situation that it's in right now, which is really a situation of concern that really can't be overstated. Concerns over the potentiality of nuclear exchanges on even a tactical level, highly concerning. just the reality of a major conventional war so close to the NATO alliance system. These are unprecedented scenarios in the post-World War II era. And we need to understand how we got here. So hoping that this helps to give us a greater understanding of the history of modern Russia, its development. Perhaps no other time in recent years has a course on the history of modern Russia been more pertinent, relevant, and important for us to sort of here in the United States for us to engage in and to understand. So I hope everyone really enjoys this class. Very excited to have all of you in the class, and let's have a great term